Hello everyone, today I'll be narrating 3 new creepyposts that I found off of the Let's Not Meet subreddit. Liking this video and subscribing to my channel helps me a lot. After you've heard these stories, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. But without further ado, let's dive straight into their experiences.
These are their stories.
This story happened about 2 years ago when I was 19 and my foster sister, Kira, was 16. It was the summer before I was going to college, and I mostly lived with my mom and Kira except for every other weekend, where I'd stay with my dad. Now, summers where I am can get really hot and humid, so we had a habit of waiting to walk the dogs until 6 or 7 p.m, because that's when it'd be cooler but still light outside. On this particular evening, Mom wasn't going to be home until late, so it was up to me and Kira to walk the dogs by ourselves, unless we wanted our younger dog, Samson, to throw tantrums due to pent-up energy. Even though we lived in the countryside and could have walked them down our street, Kira and I decided to drive out 20 minutes to a park instead. At around 7:30 p.m, Kira and I harnessed our 2 dogs, packed them up in the car, and drove them to the park. Let me quickly explain the layout of the park so that's easier to understand why we get nervous halfway through our walk. This park isn't very big, but it's popular because of its loop. The entire park is surrounded by a mile-long looping road with its attractions, like playgrounds, ponds, and a small country hall, spaced about in the inner side of the loop. The outer side is just grass, trees, and one playground at its end. Thus, it's common and expected to pass people walking the loop at least 2 times if you're walking in opposite directions, but not if you're walking in the same direction. Any cars on this road can only drive in one direction because it's a one-way road. At first, everything about this walk was normal. I parked the car, we clipped our dogs to leashes, and we started on the loop. Every so often, we'd stop so I could take pictures of our good boys, particularly of Kira trying to wrangle Samson, who pulls like his life depends on it and weaves around because he wants to smell everything. It was while I was taking one of these pictures that the first encounter happened. A man, who looked to be in his 40s, walked past us, walking the same direction we were, up towards the playground on the outer side of the loop. He smiled at Kira, nodded, and said, "Hello, you have cute dogs," and kept walking. I honestly didn't think anything of it. We're at a park at a time of day where it's common to walk around due to the cooler temperature, and people where I'm at are generally friendly. We smiled back and said hi and thanks, and that was that, or so we thought. This man passed us again only 10 minutes later, directly across from where we'd seen him previously. Just like he did before, he smiled and said hi. This time, Kira and I looked at each other once he was ahead of us and shared the, "well, that was weird," expression. Just 10 minutes earlier, he had passed us walking up towards the playground and subsequently broke off from the loop, and he'd been walking in the same direction as us. This time though, he cut in front of us and he did it in a way where we had to stop to avoid running into him. He nearly touched Kira with how close he was walking. That was already weird in and of itself. The other weird part was him cutting past us in the opposite direction. It came off almost like he wanted to walk by us again, but just like before, Kira and I brushed this weirdness off. The guy could have been enjoying a rambling stroll and doing his own thing for all we knew. Not even 5 minutes later, the same man passed us again, once again cutting so close past us that he nearly brushed shoulders with Kira. Again, this time he walked up behind us, then did this weird directionally slant walk to cross the street and go in the opposite direction, cutting us off again. I told Kira to hustle so we could get to our car and get out instead of doing a second loop. When we were almost to our car, we noticed a car creeping along behind us. We pulled to the side and stopped to let it pass, but for a second it stopped too. We figured whoever was in the car was getting ready to park, so we started walking again. The car started creeping along behind us soon after we did, so we stopped again and the car stopped with us. This was when Kira got nervous. We hadn't seen the middle-aged guy since the 3rd cutoff, so we figured I had overthought the whole thing, but here we were, with this tinted-windowed car acting weird. Was it the same guy, back with his car? A different guy? We couldn't tell. Before anything could happen though, another car idled up to the one next to us, and whoever it was sped up to the expected 5 miles per hour. We got to our car pretty fast after that and practically picked up the dogs to get them inside of it. We got in and got out of there. My mistake, however, was neglecting my rearview mirror and the well-advised rule not to drive straight home if you're worried a stranger's taken too much interest in you. We got home at around 8 something. The sun had finally disappeared behind the horizon. Mom wasn't home yet, so we got the dogs some water, locked the doors, ate a late dinner, chilled in the living room, and talked about things that didn't really matter. It was almost 9:30 when the scariest part of this whole ordeal happened. There Kira and I were, sitting on different couches, talking about something, when we noticed the ceiling briefly light up over where Kira was sitting. Due to our long, slightly curvy driveway, it's common to see headlights stream through the window, light up the ceiling, fade, then intensify. It means someone's just come home, so When the ceiling above Kira lit up, we thought nothing of it, assuming Mom was finally coming back from wherever she went that night. Mom has a habit of pulling in then checking her phone for whatever knows how long before coming inside. After a couple of minutes, I noticed the small, motion sensor light Mom set up on a table on the porch light up. Right after the light went off, we both heard the storm door open, but we didn't hear anyone pressing the code keys of our lock or jiggling the door handle, like Mom usually does right away. The moment the storm door creaked open, our 2 dogs jumped up and ran to the door, barking like mad. Our golden greyhound mix, Calvin, has a deep and scary bark. Samson, who is a big dog, jumps up on his hind legs and scrabbles to one of the small windows in a desperate attempt to see who's outside. Immediately, the storm door slammed shut, and we heard heavy footsteps on the cement of our porch. Calvin started going nuts and jumped up on Kira's couch, standing on its back instead of the cushions to look out the window. Samson ran out the room and went out the doggy door that leads to the back porch, which is a ramp going down into a fenced-off portion of our yard. I sat there, my mind steadily going blank as my heart sped up and my limbs refused to move. Kira gets up and spins around and looks out the window but can't see anything because, besides the motion light on the porch, it's too dark. So, naturally, she gets up, grabs a stray dog toy which just so happens to be a tug-of-war rope with a ball on one end, and opens the door. I tell her very calmly to shut the door and stay inside. She ignored me and stepped out onto the porch. She comes back inside after not seeing anything, but, to my utter disbelief, she disappears into the kitchen, comes back with a knife, and goes outside again. This time, she's gone for a handful of seconds before running back inside and slamming the door shut. Breathless, she tells me she went out a bit into the yard and saw the outline of a man by the run-down dog kennel we don't use anymore. When she saw him and froze, he moved. This time, she listened to me when I told her to lock the door. I managed to call Mom and she convinced me to get up and make sure all the doors were locked, including the basement and making sure the dogs were inside. After Mom got home and looked around, finding nothing, we called the non-emergency number for the police, not wanting to bother them in case we were overreacting. 2 cops came by and walked around our yard and found nothing. We got the sense they didn't believe us, but instead saw us as 2 overexcited girls with exaggerated imaginations. Still, they humored us and told us, after we told them about the park, that if we think anyone might be following us, or if someone's acting a little too creepy, not to drive straight home and to check if anyone's following us. Then, they left. But when we heard those footsteps and Kira went outside, she swears she saw someone. The dogs don't run up to the door like that and bark their heads off if no one's there. I don't know if whoever was at our house was the same guy that ran into us at the park. If it was, I don't know the reason why he cut in front of us multiple times. I don't know if he was in the car that inched behind us and stopped when we stopped. I don't know what would have happened if Calvin didn't have a scary and manic bark. I don't know much of anything, but what I do know is, if you're out and about, minding your own business, and a stranger is taking a lot of notice of you, following you, frequently running into you, or whatever, trust your gut. Don't drive or walk straight home, meander, get to a public space, or just take your time. Pay attention to your surroundings. You never know who is watching you. This happened a few years ago when I was an 18-year-old girl in high school. I worked at a store in the mall of my mid-sized Midwestern city, and that evening, I worked a closing shift. I was walking back to my car in the snowy darkness when a black SUV pulled up beside me. A woman opened the window and yelled, "Hey, excuse me, I need your help." She was a round-faced woman in her 30s or 40s and spoke with a very heavy Spanish accent. She went into a story about how her sister got into a car accident and the woman needed to get gas in her car before she could help the sister. However, she could not find a gas station and had no money, and she even said she had driven around to several churches to ask for help, but no one would help her. She was difficult to understand and did not tell the story super clearly, but I understood that she needed to find a gas station and she needed me to pay for it. She told the story between sobs and she seemed so desperate that I was moved to help her. I told her that she could follow my car to a gas station that was just across the highway and that I would buy her some gas. At the gas station, I parked in front of the store and was surprised when she did not pull up to a gas pump, as I had expected. I got out of my car and said, "Okay, don't you want me to buy and pump gas for you?" She then said something like I had misunderstood her first story. She didn't need gas. She needed money to give to her sister, and added a bunch of other facts I don't remember to continue the story. Her accent and changing story was difficult to understand. I said, "Well, I don't have cash on me, only my card. I mean, I suppose I could see if there's an ATM inside?" She immediately replied that she knew there was, which definitely is suspicious in hindsight, but I didn't pick up on it at the time. I agreed to go in and get her some money from the ATM, and as I turned to go inside, she said, "Wait, but if you give me money, I will have to repay you somehow." I said, "No, that's okay, you don't have to." She said, "No, give me your phone number so I can contact you to meet up later so I can repay you, or give me your address and I will send the money to you." I refused both, and she tried again several more times, begging me to meet up with her later to give me the money. This probably lasted 5 minutes or so. Finally, as I refused her last time, she said in a very chilling way, "Don't be so nice." Despite all of this, I for some reason was still convinced she needed my help, and I went into the gas station to use the ATM. However, in my teenage wisdom, I could not remember my PIN number, and was unable to withdraw money. I went back outside to tell the woman, and she rolled her eyes, huffed something under her breath, and very quickly got into her car and sped off. I never saw her again after that. As I drove home, I became suspicious about the scenario. I figured out after a while that the woman was definitely trying to scam me for my money, but it disturbed me more that she tried so hard to get me to meet up with her later and give her contact information. I just hope that I never have to meet someone like that in the future. When I was young, I used to live in rural Pennsylvania. Where I lived wasn't quite suburbs, but the houses were all within walking distance of each other, and we knew nearly all of our neighbors. My small neighborhood was blocked off from the ones on either side by decent-sized creeks, and to get to them you needed to climb down a fairly steep slope. This is an important detail later. My friend Rachel was a bit younger than me, by 2 or 3 years. I was 11 at the time. We had decided to go on a bike ride and ended up dropping our bikes and helmets at the top of the hill leading down to one of the creeks, and we went exploring. We were making a racket, I'm sure, squealing as we jumped around trying not to get wet. We noticed bubbles in the water and became concerned for the swans that lived down at the other end of the creek in the pond. Out of nowhere we heard a man chuckling, and he was standing at the top of the hill above near where we were standing. I said nothing. He asked what we were doing and slowly started making his way down the rough terrain of the slope. He obviously didn't know where the path to come down was. Rachel answered him that we were trying to find out where the bubbles were coming from and that she was scared it would hurt the swans, as there had never been any bubbles before today. He told us he could take a water sample and test it if we could bring it up to him, then asked our names and how old we were, still making his way down to us the entire time. Rachel told him her name and had started to say mine when I stopped her by grabbing her shoulder. I had an extremely bad feeling about this man, and I was very uncomfortable with the situation. I perked my head up looking off to the side and asked her, "Did you hear that, Rachel? I think your mom is calling us." I turned and dragged her up the path across from where the man was climbing down at, and we jumped on our bikes. I noticed this man's car parked next to where we put our bikes. Our helmets were missing. We heard the man scrambling after us, screaming that he hadn't heard anything. We started pedaling back toward my house, as Rachel lived in a different neighborhood, and the man started following us in a car after he finally reached the top. The man was still trying to get us to talk to him, so I turned off into my uncle's yard where I saw my cousin out cutting the lawn and started yelling for him. He was a big dude, 16 or so at the time, and the man in the car burnt rubber speeding off when he saw we were no longer alone. We ended up calling the police, and we were not the first girls that had the same issue with a man of that description and that car that day. So whatever that man's intentions were, I'm just glad that Rachel and I didn't have to experience them. Alright, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let me know what you thought of these stories in the comments below. But as always,
Have a nice day.